Let's have a bit of a yarn up about expertise. Well, it's not really expertise to you know, try and make recordings in situations where cars are going past and noisy. That probably wouldn't be an effective way of doing it. So we wouldn't call this expertise in making videos, would ya? But anyhow, expertise. What's expertise? Is expertise having a degree in something? Is expertise having a lot of experience with something? Is expertise, is that all it is? Probably. Okay. So expertise means you have a lot of knowledge, skill or experience in a particular area. If you're a mechanic, you have a lot of expertise in fixing cars. So you know how cars operate. You know about carburetors, you know about fan belts and suspension and how to take the disc pads off the brakes and whatever else it is that you're doing. Okay, so you have expertise in that. A rocket scientist has expertise in making rockets. A psychologist has an expertise in the scientific and philosophical inquiry of human minds and how it relates to emotions and behaviour. Okay, so the psychologists and people who are psych majors are people who are fond of world views. Maybe not fond of them, but they're familiar with how different they can be. And some of the variables that are associated with that, so it gets a bit sort of abstract. You know, there's these abstract bits of jargon or whatever that sometimes get taken out of context, because to try and talk about something that has an idea that involves more than one person. Each person has a different worldview. So a bit of jargon about the idea that's sort of similar in both of them, but not quite the same, like a personality trait or something like that, or a belief or something, or an idea. You sort of have to find a jargon sort of to contain those groups of ideas, you know. And so, in sort of like intellectual or academic style expertise, they have jargon. Okay, so the jargon of the rocket scientist, okay, is called physics and engineering. That's their jargon, and that's different from the jargon of the psychology people, and which is different again from the jargon of the sociology people and historians and whatever else. Okay, so we'll talk about Mr. Musk's expertise. Now, according to his Wikipedia pages, he has 2 degrees. One is in physics, a Bachelor of Physics, and the other one's a Bachelor of Economics. And so one would assume that his expertise in terms of his formal training in that particular area is that area. So they're both math heavy. So one might assume that he's good at mathematics. Being good at mathematics and being of sound mind isn't necessarily the same thing, though. You probably have noticed, if you've ever watched the movie A Beautiful Mind, which documented the mathematician John Nash, sort of like a biography of John Nash. That particular individual was, how you might say, he lost the plot, okay? He is the guy that invented game theory, which is something that Mr. Musk is no doubt very familiar with, and he appears to be using it quite extensively. But nonetheless, that guy's skill with mathematics and that guy's skill to develop game theory, which is a very useful economic theory, it turns out, and he won a Nobel Prize for it because I thought it was really good, meant that the same psychological tendencies that John Nash had that led him to see things in that particular obscure style, that led him to figure out that would be a good equation to come up with, a good theory to come up with, also contributed to his psychological demise. It meant that he was habitually making connections between things that weren't there. Okay, he was making connections between things that weren't there. Illusory correlations, projections, false mirrors. Okay, And so when he was doing that, sometimes, because it's someone in that situation, they might get really good at it, and they might actually come up with some really obscure things that are true. It's not to say that strange things and weird things and obscure connections between things aren't possible, because they are. What, however, is the case is that there are a lot of things that are not connected in that particular way. There's no, for example, there's no relationship between coffee and clouds. So there's no one-to-one relationship between coffee and clouds. Okay, clouds are there to make the rain to grow to coffee beans, and the coffee beans get turned into coffee, but you have to go through those logical processes to get to the point from clouds to coffee. So you can say, yeah, there's a relationship between the two. If you jump through the other logical steps in the middle, and those are absolutely essential, otherwise there's no relationship at all. They're two completely different things. So the idea of those two things being related when they're not, okay, is an example of an illusory correlation or an example of a false connection, okay? And if someone gets stuck on that idea, that's a delusion, okay? So let's have a look at Mr. Musk, okay? Some of the things that he said that would qualify as delusional. First of all, without actually being formally diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, some people have noticed he was trying to use it as an excuse for bad behaviour, namely the Nazi salute. The other thing as well is, prior to that, he's been quoted in a couple of videos as saying that he's someone who takes language literally. And although for that particular individual that may actually be the case, it's also the case that he's capable of taking it not literally. So it's not 100% of the time, even with that man. Now let's talk about the relationship between taking language literally and autism spectrum disorder, and why Mr. Musk is not an expert on that area. In addition to lacking any psychological or psychiatric qualifications whatsoever and not actually being formally diagnosed, he's making a guess based on his life experiences and whatever excuses under game theory and marketing he wants to make at the time. Okay, he wants to portray himself as a man with over 9,000 autism. Okay, he's the king of the fucking meme, so much that he's a living fucking meme, because they're the kinds of people that he thinks are going to buy his gadgets. Okay, we don't actually necessarily see any reason other than that, unless he genuinely believes it's true of him. Okay, even if he does, and even if it is true that he has autism spectrum disorder, which is probably not, given the circumstances, he lacks the expertise to formally diagnose himself. He also lacks the expertise to go and diagnose everyone else. He's not a psychiatrist, he's not a psychologist, he's not a man who's formally diagnosed or was able to do comparing and contrasting between his own symptoms and the symptoms of other people with that particular means of perceiving reality, okay? The sword is a bit strong. We'll say means of perceiving reality, okay? So, Would you say that he is an expert because he has $1 billion, and he has rockets? Okay, his rockets don't work particularly well. People have noticed. He's not the one building them either. He's the CEO that became the CEO because he bought shares. He didn't. There's commentators who've looked through the records and go, no, he didn't found SpaceX, he didn't found Neuralink, he didn't found Tesla Motors, he didn't found PayPal, but in each of those cases, he's invested money like a capitalist industrialist to buy shares in the company so he can gain enough control over the company to become CEO, and then he's told everyone in the boardroom to say that he's the guy that founded the company. Okay, which is marketing spin, and it's bullshit. Okay, so his propensity to craft lies and, ask for bullshit to happen sounds like he's not particularly autistic. One of the things you'll probably notice about autistic people is that although they're capable of dishonesty, they're not capable of dishonesty intentionally and that often, and with that much, what you might call premeditation. A lot of autistic people suffer from what you might call GIGO. Okay, garbage in, garbage out. Okay, if the person that you suspect to be autistic is expressing a lot of dishonesty, then you're not dealing with someone who's autistic. You're dealing with someone who's expressing dishonesty. The dishonesty might be motivated by fear, It could be motivated by what are the narcissism spectrum disorders. It could just be that they're delusional and they're holding faulty beliefs. Whatever the case might be, that is not an autistic symptom. Dishonesty is a sign of it not being autism. Okay? Those are people who you will probably have noticed habitually get sucked in by other people's lies. Okay? People who get sucked in, seem to habitually get sucked in by other people's lies, who seem to be gullible. Like, you go, that person's obviously quite smart. They're very fluent with their language. They seem to be very perceptive. Heck, they seem to be smarter than other people in some cases. But for some reason, they're gullible. You think they're gullible? They're definitely adults. They're obviously not stupid. Are they perceiving reality or perceiving people's intentions and behaviour differently from the people around them? Well, yeah, if the answer is yes, then you're probably dealing with an autistic person. Be fair. Okay? The one who is crafting the lies and deceiving others is probably not the autistic person. Okay, the one who got sucked in by the lies, the one who got roped into it by the flying monkeys, whatever else, they're probably the autistic person. Okay? Autistic people have a long association, okay, of being the punching bag. Okay? They get picked on because they don't understand what other people's intentions are. Okay? Up to a certain point. When it comes to comprehending intentionality, for normal people, comprehending intentionality is difficult. It is difficult to truly comprehend what another person's worldview or beliefs are until they tell you. And if they're not being honest, you don't know. You can pick up on vibes, you can analyse it, you can do post hoc analysis, you can do all those things, but it's difficult. It's difficult for those people to even know what their attitudes and beliefs are behind their worldviews, because if they've had it for a long time, then it's built up and up and up over a set of experiences, and they think they're experts in that, and it becomes as though it's intuitive reasoning. And so it becomes difficult for them to pass through what those intentions, attitudes, and beliefs are. And that's for people who are not autistic. If you're an autistic person and you're struggling to perceive someone else's intentions when they're outright lying to you, on top of people's ordinary confusions associated with that particular way of doing stuff, then you're not really stupid at all, okay? It's just the complexities of social life. And so you'll probably find if someone's intention is to be dishonest, to manipulate ideas like that, okay, then he's probably not autistic. Don't think Elon Musk is autistic, okay? He might be a fibber. It's not actually the case that people with autism spectrum disorders all take words literally either. You'll probably notice the Dan Aykroyd effect. Okay, Dan Aykroyd is known for a dry sense of humour, delivered in a sort of monotone style voice, but you can rest assured there's sarcasm in that. Okay, it's sarcasm delivered dryly. Okay, it's a dry, sarcastic wit. Okay, the way that way that wit is expressed is with a different tone. Okay, a different style, but it's there. Okay. Okay. If you look at Mr. Alfred Yankovic, that man appears to be autistic. He's another example of a comedian who doesn't say that he has autism spectrum disorder or Asperger's, but from an outsider's perspective, could be a candidate for a diagnosis. Some of the things he does look like a bloke who is quite frankly trying to cope with, but he thought that they were doing this and that, but they weren't, and he's frustrated, which is something normal people can go through. Sorry, the word comparing autistic people to normal doesn't sound like a nice thing to do. We'll just say non-autistic people, sorry about that. Anyway, autistic and non-autistic person, it could be either in that event. However, it seems to be a strong thing about the guy who's struggling with intentions. He's struggling so much, he thinks his pancreas is connected up to all the other pancreases in the world. He jokes about that. Okay? That's a joke. He's a comedian, he's joking. You don't have to take it seriously, but if you did, okay, you might want to take into consideration that someone like that could be swamped with not knowing what his own intentions are, not knowing what other people's intentions are, that would create autism-like experience, even if he's not autistic. Were that a true story and not just a joke? So, if you looked at it from that perspective, okay, is there evidence to suggest that Mr. Yankovic only takes words literally? Okay, as stated. Well, okay, there's no evidence to support that he actually believed that he was Harry Potter. Okay, so he was Harry Potter. His parents didn't support his piano, accordion, polka music, and he had an illicit affair with Madonna, and then when he kicked what's her name, Pablo Escobar in the face. There's no evidence to support that he actually did that. Here, if there was some kind of esoteric situation where that was possible, like a not self box in the astral or something like that, then maybe that could be the case. However, at the conscious level, it doesn't appear to be that man takes it literally at all. He could be an advanced astral perceiver with a broad third eye that's quite perceptive. Can't rule that out. We're not saying spiritual phenomenon doesn't exist by saying this. What we're saying is that whatever that man's actual intentions are, okay, he's probably trying to figure it out. Okay, he's probably been struggling with that and trying to figure it out. Struggling to figure out what other people's intentions are. And if he's struggling with intentions, if he's struggling with perceiving his own intentions are, and we're struggling with perceiving what other people's intentions are, he's probably autistic. Okay? There's a lot of people who don't identify as autistic, okay, who presume to know what people's intentions are. They presume to know what their own intentions are. Okay? And although typically when challenged, they go, oh no, didn't mean it like that, meant it the other way, that becomes clear for them. Probably at the time they were doing it, they didn't know. So, it sort of makes you wonder whether autism is even a thing at all. Or if you're just dealing with people with sensory processing disorder, okay, who are sensitive to sound and light and things like that, who habitually try to be honest when they talk, no matter how much they struggle with dishonesty, whether it's their own or someone else's, typically someone else's, and so that kind of implied intention or behind someone's intention is not something they're going to know. So you can't go around presuming to know what their intentions were better than they do if you don't know what your own are. Okay? Non-autistic people struggle with that too, more than they realise. And perhaps the advantage for people who've had to deal with autism, or the idea that they had autism, or both, is that they know that they don't know. Do the so-called normies know that they don't know? And if the so-called normies don't know that they don't know, then why would you say that Mr. Musk, who has no psychology qualifications whatsoever, no psychiatric qualifications whatsoever, has never built a rocket ship in his life, has never built a single one of the things he's talked about, he's been the front man of a salesman and the CEO that bought shares in those companies, despite having his Bachelor of Physics, he's focused more on the economics and the business side of things. So, expert? Don't think so.